From the dawn of civilization, certain key elements were afoot for humans to be a superior species. From our mastery over fire, tools, but an overlooked and significant step forward would be our ability to have a soft, smooth surface through a process called sanding. From tables to chairs to early wooden utensils, the cornerstone of our civilization. I'm Joseph Gray, and I'm here to establish the 3 most important sanding tools which we must embrace for a quality finish. According to the online website Wikipedia, sanding is the process of removing material, in our case, removing wood for a smoother surface. Today I'll be discussing 3 electrical sanders. First, I'll explain what an electrical sander is. Then I'll go on to my first point about belt sanders. I'll explain what an orbital sander is, and finally I'll speak about our 3rd sander, which is the finishing sander. Each electrical sander has its own specific job. Now, raise your hand if you've ever used sandpaper before. A few of you I see. The process of sanding requires a sheet of paper with an abrasive material glued on to one side, running back and forth over the surface. This paper comes in different grits, from anywhere between 40 to 2000 and higher. The lower the grit, the more coarse the paper, thus removing more material. The higher the grit means the abrasive material is smaller and more fine, which means less material is being removed, causing a smoother surface. Now, for those who have hand sanded before, you know sanding is a time-consuming process. An electrical sander increases the motion of the sandpaper, thus producing a faster and smoother finish. Now, let's talk about our first electrical sander, which is the belt sander. According to the online source, Wikipedia, a belt sander consists of an electrical motor turning the sandpaper attached to a rotating drum. The sandpaper isn't just like a sheet of paper like most, but a faceted belt which can continuously turn and sand. The online home service publication, The Family Handyman, describes belt sanders as the workhorse. They are aggressive and are most useful for removing waste and bulk, such as large gouges from your tools. The Family Handyman suggests using more coarse grits from 40 to 220, but be careful, a few drawbacks include oversanding and scratch marks. Now, we'll change our focus to a less aggressive and extremely beneficial tool, the orbital sander. These electrical sanders, according to Fine Home Building by Taunton Press Incorporated, is a square or rectangular shaped sander which is perfect for corner work. Though the orbital sander can remove a good amount of material, it is not overly aggressive. The orbital sander has a bottom section called a foot. This foot is movable from the main base of the machine. The foot rotates in a circular pattern. The orbital sander is a great middle sander. It can take grits from 40 to 2000, all interchangeable by attaching the sheet to the foot. This is personally my favorite sander because it's so multifunctional. The sander can remove waste but also leave a smooth finish, all depending on what grit sandpaper sheet you cut and fit to it. Unfortunately, a disadvantage would be the small circular pattern scratches left behind from the motion of the foot. But the higher the grit you sand, the less noticeable these scratches are. And finally, we have our last sander, the finishing sander, or random orbital sander. According to the infamous craftsman Bob Villa, finishing sanders are small sanders with a rotating foot, which means it randomly rotates, or it rotates in a random motion to reduce pattern marks left behind on the wood. These sanders typically are used with one hand and comes with adjustable speeds. Bob Villa also stated that sandpaper to be used with these types of sanders are disc-shaped and usually come in higher grits with adhesive attachments on the back of them. My personal finishing sander uses Velcro attachments, just like the finishing sander we have here. Though finishing sanders will not remove material fast, they will leave a very smooth finish and surface if used correctly with the right grit sandpaper. Now that we've covered the basics for the three main types of the electrical sanders, which again are the belt sander, orbital sander, and finishing sander, there are a few things to be aware of before purchasing. First, sanders can come in all shapes and sizes. I've seen aggressive sanders, not built like typical belt sanders, but in fact are more like large, powerful orbital sanders. I've seen finishing sanders that were square, not just round. As you do your research before purchasing a sander, ask yourself, what are the tasks and duties to be performed by this sander? If you need to remove a lot of material fast, your best bet would be a belt sander. If you need a more general purpose sander, then go for an orbital sander. But if you are requiring something to leave an extra smooth, mark-free finish, your best bet would be a random orbital or finishing sander. I hope you leave here with a greater comprehension of sanding, knowledge of the few tools associated with the sanding, and the general sanding practices we've covered here today. Thank you.